What is disability rights and disability justice? There lies the conundrum. So depending on what part of the community you talk about, disability rights is a white-centered movement, particularly a white paralyzed male disability movement that was predicated upon including into the existing rights of America, hence disability rights. Rights to go to school, rights to go to... Disability justice is a framework that is centered on Black, brown, indigenous, and people of color. Coming out of the Bay Area in 2005, centering the most impacted. There are 10 principles of disability justice. Disability justice is a framework for acceptance in society. Disability rights is to be included in those rights in that society. I'm probably one of the people who stand outside and be like, it's all the same thing. But at the end of it, it's really like, but what are we fighting for? What is disability justice? Right? What is disability rights? What is right? If you can't define justice, how do you define rights? So I don't see them as oppositional. I see them as an extension and an expansion of, but I'm also looking at it like you need justice and rights, because the society as we have it constructed only works in those modalities. And so until we can get, again, humans to take their heads out of their butts, we need to have certain frameworks and positionings that will allow us to do justice in order for the child to have the right to education. We need justice in order for you to have the right to be married, right? And how can I seek remediation if I don't know what my rights are and we haven't defined justice? So those are the two things, and that's probably the most concise way of putting it. Disability rights really has been the disability rights movement, has been the largest movement. You probably would know it through things like Crip Camp or the 501, the 504 protests. Disability justice is more recent in terms of the ascension of Black disability politics, BIPOC disability justice movements. But in the end, I think both things are seeking to do the same thing, which is have a society in which our human condition is not used as a curmudgeon to prevent us from education, employment, housing, healthcare, transportation, entrepreneurship. Because what people don't want to talk about within any of these movements is how we are not above our own demons. Meaning that in the disability rights movement, it's a huge issue around racism, huge issue around homophobia, huge issues around transphobia. In the disability justice movement, there's been rumblings about who gets to say they're doing disability justice, who gets to own the framework, who gets to use the framework, who gets to state that. And again, for me, the outcome is simple. If you're arguing about who gets to use what, then you're missing the point. What is the point of every social justice movement? What is the point of, you having somebody like an anti-defamation league, right? What is the point about the commercial with saying, if you see this blue square, let's fight against anti-Semitism? Well, as a person of color, I have to fight against anti-Semitism. As a Black man in America, I have to do that. Because racism is racism, oppression is oppression. But if you are able to look at me and say, well, you need to fight for against anti-Semitic statements, but then you are not for inclusive education, right? If you're saying you need to fight for women's rights, but you don't want Black people in your neighborhood, I was like, one of the larger issues was back when it was called the gay marriage fight. That was very much a white gay male issue, a white lesbian issue. There was no issue, I'm talking about marriage equality for people with disabilities. So again, you can't say you're fighting for oppression while being oppressive. You can't talk about I want justice while doing the same injustice to other people because they don't fit your narrative. And so these movements, every social justice movement, ultimately is to get that part of the society to be imbued with the rights to exist. And so unless we do cross-solidarity, cross-issue work, we will perpetually be in a state of movement. I'm in a movement, but damn it, I'm tired. The goal of the disability rights movement and disability justice movement is, and I will phrase this and say this is Keith's interpretation, because I am not necessarily the most popular kid on the block when it comes to this stuff. I think the goal really is the goal of every social justice movement, is to have a society in which this is not a thing. The fact that you have the career fighting for your life is problematic. And so when you're talking about fighting for disability rights, that's problematic. To have to convince a state legislature that a parent should be able to send their child to school and not worry about a teacher saying, I have to stick to an IEP, it's problematic. And so how do we get a society in which we are functioning optimally to get people their rights and their needs and their services met? And so I think for justice, disability justice has a framework. But I think, again, if you ask people, define justice, define rights, you'll get 1,000,001 answers. I think for me, I see everything in totality. I see everything in terms of its interconnectedness as well as what the end goal is. And the end goal is that the reason we're fighting for rights and justice is so we can go and mind our business and just be. That is the goal of disability rights and disability justice.